I'm going to talk about sustainable leadership, of course, but I'm going to talk about it in a little bit different way, I think. But I'm going to try, if I can, relate a little bit to what you've been saying, Robin and Mats, because I think it all relates. I teach here. I teach the Responsible Leadership course at the Master Program, and I teach our new big, not program, but our new addition, our biggest reform of the undergrad program here, Global Challenges, which Mats mentioned very, very briefly. And I will talk a little bit about that, and of course a little bit also about some research, because we're all researchers here too. The way I look at sustainable leadership when I talk about that, when I teach it, is really about integrating different levels. I think for me that is a key word. It's about integrating and getting like the big picture. And one of the pictures we usually use when we do, maybe it's actually better to take this and I can erase it a little bit. Although I like that one, I could use that a little bit more, maybe your picture. So one of the pictures we usually use is that today we are seeing a lot of challenges, and we do need to manage risks. So how do we do that? And what kind of challenges are we facing? So one way of looking at it that we do is that we're actually facing, of course, challenges we all know about that comes from the environment. We do need to have, if we are talking about sustainable leadership, of course we do need to address the issues about how the planet will survive. That's part of sustainable leadership. We also face issues which is more economical. For a company, of course, new business models. How do we innovate new business models? How do we find, maybe new ways to create value? So of course, there's an economical challenge for the world and for us as business people. We also talk, of course, about the social challenges we have in society, for example, today. The divides, the polarization. We're seeing a lot of polarization. How do we overcome that? That's a challenge for a long-term survival as well. And then we talk about I put a heart there, the existential challenges. What will happen with work in the future? Maybe we'll create lots of new work. Maybe we'll have other ways of actually organizing society than we know. That, of course, raises a lot of questions about meaning and purpose and why do we do what we do? So existential challenges as well. And this, of course, is taken from lots of different perspectives. World Economic Forum, the fourth industrial revolution, is one way of adding the existential challenges. This is more, maybe more common in economics, using these kind of challenges. But addressing all that, that's also part of sustainable leadership. Because if we are to survive as a planet, as a society, as an organization, and as individuals, we do need to address them. So we address them these days. We start with doing that the very first day when the students arrive here at the business school, which is fairly new. It started this fall. But how can you use the tools? How can you use business administration? How can you use economics? And of course, integrate that with other disciplines, natural sciences, social sciences, humanities, arts, to better address and solve these issues. And we talk about it on different levels. We talk about it, of course, on an individual level, the human being. We talk about it on an organizational level. We talk about it, and I should add networks. I was thinking about that when you were talking there. Usually we say society, but of course networks, it could, worth thinking about, adding knowledge to each other too. And of course the planet. So addressing those issues on all these four levels is really part of sustainable leadership. And one way we think about that is that perhaps we cannot address issues about the environment, for example, or social divides, if we don't address issues with our own kind of sustainable well-being. How do we sustain as leaders? How do our groups sustain? How do our organizations sustain? So it's really about taking all those perspectives, all those levels, and also thinking about our own part in it. And of course, there are lots of, it's a lot of fantastic development in the world, but there are also some worries, I would say. And of course, one of the things we need to address too, we think, in research and teaching is also how do we actually create well-being? How do we thrive? And networks are fantastic. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to cross boundaries. It's beautiful. I love it myself. But sometimes it's a bit difficult too, to work in very new ways, to handle boundaries. Where are my boundaries? So that becomes another part, of course, of it, sustaining ourselves. And of course, when we teach young people here at the SSE, and the numbers there worry me, where we see a lot of stress, a lot of issues especially among young women. And of course, needing to address those issues and needing to address it in the organizations too. So one way we address it is through what we call compassion. And that sounds very, sometimes, not so Swedish, I would say. The way we look at it, I work in a research program together with Karolinska Institutet, the medical school. It's become very popular to work with compassion. So what is compassion? How do we address that? Well, the way we look at it is compassion, of course, for the world, for our organizations, for our groups, but also for ourselves. We look at it in the research, we look at it in different kind of organizations. We look at it on a level where we look at the culture in the organization. Can we create a compassionate culture? But we also look at it on an individual level by working with compassion training, once again together with the medical doctors, psychologists in this kind of interdisciplinary teams. Can we also address it on a personal level? So one model we use, I give you one more model because it's always nice with these kind of models. One model we use is taken from a British researcher called Paul Gilbert. He works with a very simple one he talks about our three systems and then the soothing system. As human beings, we have three major systems, emotion regulation, really. One is threat. We all know that. Threat, which is, of course, is really important. Because if we didn't have that system, if we didn't get that adrenaline, if we didn't get that cortisol, we wouldn't be able to jump if a bus arrived, or lion is what you usually use, but that doesn't happen so often. So we need a threat system, of course, to react. And then we have the drive system, the excitement of going after new ideas, of raising the kind of level of dopamine. Really exciting. This is what, achievements. A lot of organizations, I would say, that I encounter, and a lot of my students that I encounter, are pretty much into that system. Perhaps more than the threat, more into the kind of drive, which is fantastic. Again, we need that. But how do we also balance? The whole idea about this kind of research is really about how do we also balance that system with something more soothing, with actually creating security, because that's also needed to be able to address those big issues about sustainability or networking or finding all these exciting ideas. How do we balance that? How do we also create the soothing in organizations, in cultures, but also in human beings. So some of the things we will do when we do that kind of research, and also in the classes here, of course, is about, okay, so how do you take care of yourself? Robin mentioned the surfing. Probably a way to balance all your slide sharing, knowledge, all the energy, the need to balance. And we all have different ways. But how do we actually address that, and how do we see that, and how can we help people in organizations addressing that? And one of the things, we go in with 6 week in the research project we're doing, we go with a 6-week training. And right now we've been comparing one big bank with a public agency. And we've done like a 6-week training with people in the bank and in the public agency of compassion training, where self-compassion is one part. Like really just sometimes very, very simple things. Taking care of yourself, but of course also of each other. Also of using compassion for those big issues and for the organizations, your colleagues, and sometimes even your boss. So that's also sustainable leadership. Addressing that level as well.
Oh, thank you, Emma.